Signaling in an urban survival environment. Now let's ascertain together what that entails. Signaling in an urban environment can be summed succinctly: communicating your needs to an external party. I'll say that again. There is a reason that this is not a series and it's just a one-off video. Signaling in an urban environment, in an urban survival situation, is nothing more than communicating your needs to an external party. I'm going to say it again. Communicating your needs to an external party. Okay? In any survival situation, wilderness, urban, jungle, sea, polar ice caps, mountainous, tundra, etc. Whatever it is, the moon, the four survival essentials amazingly remain the same. But the dynamics of the environment are completely different. Okay, so in an urban survival situation, signaling is nothing more than communicating your needs to an external party. Now, we could say that about every form of signaling. You can even say that in the wilderness, because you're communicating your needs to an external party. You're trying to get rescued. But that sentence, communicating your needs to an external party, is not as relevant, not as to the point as rescue me. Because that's all signaling tends to be in a wilderness environment. When you're in a wilderness survival situation, you're just saying in a very loud way, as visual and audible as possible, rescue me, I'm here. That's all you're doing in the wilderness. Because there generally isn't people around to help you in a wilderness survival situation, hence why you're trying to get rescued, unless you somehow come across an isolated village, a remote village of some type, and so forth, which doesn't happen often in those situations. Point is, in urban survival, if you're homeless, if it's a nuclear war, if it's just a normal war zone, if it's a pandemic, if it's a zombie apocalypse, if it's any type of really wild urban catastrophe, it doesn't matter what it is, you're not trying to get the attention of planes, you're not lighting flares, you're not shooting flare guns, you're not lighting fires, you're not making the triangle, you're not doing the general, you're not making the general SOS signs, you're not trying to get rescued, so to speak. Because if push comes to shove, everything a person does in life is trying to get rescued. People go to work 5 days a week so they can rescue themselves. In such way, they have the money they need, they have everything their family needs, and so forth. But that's when you start skimming off point. In a wilderness survival situation, you're right on point. You're trying to get rescued, literally. But in an urban survival situation, it would be quite silly to light a fire in the middle of a roundabout, being homeless, saying, I'm over here, please rescue me. You'd probably be taken to a mental asylum, if not arrested and charged for starting a fire in public. And in an urban survival situation, in a different urban survival situation, a war zone or a nuclear conflict, lighting that fire at the roundabout to get people's attention and seek rescue isn't going to do much. Most people, if not all of them, will turn around and tell you, oh, yeah, I need to be rescued too. I'm in the same situation. So you're starting to get my point. Those 4 elements of survival are universal, but they're specific to the type of survival environment you're subject to. Okay, the demands of shelter even change in different environments, not just signalling. Demands of uh, water and food procurement change when you're in a different environment. Water is so much easier to obtain in an urban environment. It's just a matter of going to the supermarket, turning on a tap, going to Macca's and asking for a free cup of water. You can see how dynamics change in environments, and in an urban survival environment, you must have it in your head that the only time you'd emulate signalling in a wilderness environment, in a wilderness survival situation, the only time you'd emulate that in an urban survival situation is if there's no human within a 50-kilometre radius or something about no human within distance that you can reasonably travel to. There's no resources around, and for all purposes, the urban environment you're in is as not useful, because wilderness, if you know how to tap into the wilderness, it can be very useful, but for all purposes, that urban environment is as isolated as a wilderness environment. So again, the only time you'd emulate your typical survival signalling within a wilderness survival situation is when you're in an urban survival environment that mimics everything in a wilderness survival environment. No persons within a large proximity, no telecommunications available, etc. So instead of there being trees, it's buildings. Instead of there being mud and dirt, you've got concrete. So if that's the case, then you may use that type of signalling so you can get rescued, because you've got nothing there to utilise. But that is very, very rare. Very rare. So hence, urban survival situations dictate that signalling is communicating your needs to an external party. Okay, that's what you need to master in a very serious time in our beautiful planet's life, especially if nuclear conflict occurs and serious conflicts and major pandemics and things are 100 times worse, if not more worse than what the coronavirus showed us. You need to master that type of signalling, because you'll most likely you'll most likely be within an urban survival situation and not a wilderness survival situation if all hell breaks loose, when the supply chain breaks down, when wars break out, etc. So you need to know best how to communicate your needs to an external party. That's the second part of the sequence for essential survival factors. That is shelter/fire, then signalling, then food, then water, then food. So that's the second on the list. So it's very important. You know how to communicate with non-hostile parties. Avoid communicating with hostile parties. It's very important you know how to barter. Okay, why would I say bartering is signalling? Because it's a form of communication. You're communicating your needs to someone else. Okay, I need water. I don't have water. I haven't had water for 2 days. I'm in this urban environment. Fuck, all the taps are dry. I need water. I've got 2 bottles of whiskey in my backpack. Useless right now. What do I do to fucking get water? Jesus, I bet you there'll be someone with 1,000 bottles of water because they're smart, but they won't have whiskey. And I could offer them this beautiful bottle of whiskey, just one, not both of them. and they may give me 100 bottles of water in return. Yep, whiskey will become a great commodity in a bartering environment. So you've got to think like that. All of a sudden, signalling turns on its head. Signalling is no longer just about, doing some fucking exotic octopus dance in the middle of the desert to get the pilot's attention with fire around. It's being in an urban environment and knowing how to communicate your needs to an external party. And bartering has everything to do with that. So you're trying to master your ability to communicate as part of survival signaling in that environment, the urban survival environment. And interestingly, the best thing to be is proactive in that regard and already have survival mechanisms in place, a survival network should all hell break loose. Everyone should have a survival plan. Anyone who doesn't have a survival plan is ignorant and they don't know how the world works. Okay, we're in a very safe country. We're in a very beautiful country. We're in a country that's highly unlikely to break down, but it doesn't mean that the world won't force that situation, even on countries like us. The way the world works is amazing. It's just an ecosystem, a giant ecosystem. Ecosystems collapse, ecosystems build. It's just that simple. We are not outside the laws of environmental science. So, and when you look at what nuclear weapons can do and what could come about, it's very silly not to have some sort of survival network. Now, that doesn't mean you've got to be batshit crazy and start, dialing up friends. Oh, we're going to make a survival gang. We need 100 people. It's not what I'm talking about. A survival network is just a matter of you having functioning walkie-talkies, functioning communication equipment when all hell breaks loose, so you can talk to family members, so you can talk to best friends, and turn that situation into a new situation where you and your friends and your family and all those close to you band together and execute survival mechanisms and execute survival maneuvers. Okay, shit, this is what we've all got to do together. We're not going to survive alone. We're going to bring all our resources together and we're going to head off here. We're going to do this. We're going to stay in contact. Have you ever watched that series, The 100? Now, it's interesting. I'm not a fan of TV or movies insofar that they're all full of shit. But I'm a big fan of them, on the contrary, where their creative prowess is concerned, where their principles are concerned. It doesn't, just because a lot of them are full of shit, it doesn't mean that they don't embody truths that are significant in a lot of life scenarios. So in the series The 100, they're down on the earth, but they don't need to be rescued. They just need to stay in communication with each other, so they make walkie-talkies. And that turns their situation into a viable one. They can start moving, they can start gathering, they can start doing things. So you've got to think of that as signaling in an urban survival situation. You've got to have those mechanisms in place. Okay, now I don't expect you to make the walkie-talkies like the engineers did in the 100 show, but you can certainly buy them. You can certainly have a basic knowledge of how electronics work. You can certainly have the batteries or whatever you need to keep them in operation. Okay, that's how you stay alive in an urban survival situation. Now then there's the argument a hostile force can triangulate those signals, literally those signals, and that could be true. So it may not be prudent to use telecommunication equipment, walkie-talkies, in particular scenarios. But as far as Australians own their country or the government operates, we don't really need to worry about that. Our government's not out there to get us. They're certainly going to be all for Australians surviving. If they weren't, I'd be very angry. But if a hostile force is now in place and have all their equipment here, they can easily triangulate those signals and really fuck you up. So it might not be wise to use those communication devices in such a scenario. You can balance the situation and what measures are warranted. But in a general sense, at the start, you're probably safe to use walkie-talkies and telecommunication equipment just to stay in contact with your immediate survival network. And that survival network, as I said, isn't some crazy batshit gang or Facebook group or something like that. It's just your immediate family. It's just, okay, here, there's your walkie-talkie, or there's your phone, there's your satellite phone, there's this, there's that. We've got to stay in contact with each other when all hell breaks loose. This is what we're going to do. You may have other protocols, and much more effective protocols than telecommunication equipment. It might be, okay, these are our agreed upon markers. There's marker A, marker B, marker C, D, so forth, all the way to Z, back to double A, double B, and you can keep going around until you get to quadruple A. Anyway, those markers are agreed upon locations. This is where we'll meet. This is where we'll be at this time, at this date. So you can all go along on your own for a while and then meet back, and you can have consensus that, okay, if someone doesn't present themselves at this time at this location, it means something's wrong. So that's when we've got to effect an emergency protocol and trace their steps, and then that's when they need to be rescued. You getting my drift? So communication is old-fashioned communication, even modern communication, is of the essence in a urban survival situation. Knowing how to communicate with other parties, and they'll generally be family members and friends. But you'll also need to know how to communicate with non-hostile parties, and you'll need to know what they look like. So it's not something many people know at first. You'll start to know you'll know the general feeling of what a non-hostile party looks like. You'll work that out as it comes. And when you can ascertain someone's non-hostile, then you can barter with them. You can swap something for water. You don't carry it with you though, otherwise they may rob you, even somebody who looks non-hostile. You tell them, I've got this and this waiting a couple of Ks, I'll come back. I'll give you a bottle of whiskey, I'll take some water. I just stumbled across your location, and I've got nothing here to offer you at the moment, but I can come back. I've got whiskey, would you like that? Because I really need water. And they may accept it, they may reject it. Now you've got to be careful, because some people might find that suspicious, so you've got to make that determination at that time. If you say, oh, I'm coming back, they may think you're coming back with 10 or 20 people to attack them, and they may actually harm you. So you've got to be very careful with how you approach that situation. If you can see they're potentially hostile in that regard, don't even barter with them at that point. Get your thing first and then barter with them, if you must, if it's a matter of survival. So there's a lot of ins and outs with urban survival signaling. In my view, it's much more intricate than wilderness survival rescue. Wilderness survival rescue is much simpler. Okay, what else have we got to cover in urban survival signaling? Your laptop, your Chromebook, your iPad, whatever you've got. If you're a homeless person, your survival signaling is trying to hook up with essential services, welfare, jobs, places to stay, homeless kitchens, all those sorts of things. And you can use social media, you can use Facebook, it's all connected. So that's your survival signaling as a homeless person. Now in my case, I've got better ways to procure survival necessities than doing that. So I don't do that. But that's me. My survival skills in an urban environment is just, at a very high standard. Almost infallible. I won't say infallible, because it just takes one injury or dropping dead. But if you take those elements away, dropping dead or being injured, you can place $1 million bet every day of the week that I'm going to turn around the next week with a smile on my face and a few $100 bills in my hand, and I can buy some food. I won't have to steal some chicken nibblies, or I've got a new mansion. I'm just that type of survivor. So I'm not going to go into that more. The point is, in a general sense, all people undertaking all people subject to homelessness should look at their signalling equipment that way. That is, their laptop, their Chromebooks, their phones, etc. Because that's all signalling equipment. That's all it is. All the internet is a giant web of signals. Nothing more. Signals are arranged very cleverly to appear on your screen. And that looks like something visual. Ooh, website. Ooh, press the button. They're just all pixels that are given instructions from signals. So it's a signaling equipment. Your laptop's nothing more than a very elaborate signaling device. Okay? That's all it is. Even your Microsoft Word, you're signaling to your computer what you want to be, what you want put on your screen. It's all signaling. Your brain signals. Bang. It conveys information to Microsoft Word. Signals appear as letters on the screen. It's all signaling. So you must see that if you're homeless, you must see your laptop and your computer devices as signaling equipment to get in contact with the wider world and its the services it can offer you. Okay? You may be comfortable like I am because you've watched this course, you've taken heed of everything I've said in this course. And you may be in a great situation where you may not need to use those services, but perhaps you should because your skills aren't yet as elaborate or as great as mine, because I do have a lifetime of urban environment experience, and I have about a year of outright urban survival experience. The shit that you watch in movies. So I know what I'm talking about, and it's fucking great. I love every second of it. Anyway, it's beside the point. So you know what to be doing as a homeless person when the grid's up. When the grid's down, everyone's home. Oh, when the grid's down and you're homeless, it's unlikely that the grid's going to be down unless it's a war zone or something else. In that case, you won't really any longer look at yourself as homeless, but as part of that wartime situation or the pandemic, the nuclear war, zombie apocalypse, whatever it is, etc. But when the grid's up, which is most of the time, which is nearly always the case, as it's been for the last 100 years or so, since the Industrial Revolutions, is the second or third one. Point is, for at least over 100 years, the grid's been up on a continual basis, even during all our great wars. And if you're homeless, your signalling equipment is very simple. Your computer devices, as I've explained, how to use them, how to get in contact with the wider world, to communicate your needs to an external party. See how I keep on going back to that? To communicate your needs to an external party. So you'll contact your services, buddies from Facebook, on some page, people who do a soup kitchen, people who do free accommodation for homeless. You'll get in contact with all that. You'll be sweet if you need to. And then you've got all the other vast options at your disposal in this course. Take note that you should try to take those options first, what's offered while the grid's up, and then use all the techniques that I've supplied you with. So, moving away from homelessness, I've also explained to you what to do when the grid is down, when there's an outright war, when your city's been hit with a nuke, when there's a massive pandemic, so much worse than the coronavirus, when there's a zombie outbreak, because it's actually technically true that it can happen. There are zombie drugs out there, just not yet unleashed, thank God. And there are heaps other stuff, biological hazards out there that can be unleashed. So when those situations occur, you know what to do. You know to have a proactive network, a proactive communication plan with your immediate network, your family members and friends. To have agreed upon places to meet. To have functioning walkie-talkies or functioning uh, radio receivers and transmitters, because if you do, you can send signals to each other for at least 50 k's, 100 k's, depending on how good that equipment is. And that's all you'll need. You just need to have those receivers and transmitters on hand, and you will be sweet. So that's that. That's how you communicate in an urban survival catastrophe. Communicating your needs to an external party. It's that simple.